Good morning, everyone, dear PhD professors, PhD students, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm Fatima Moustaid. I'm doing my thesis jointly with the University of Ayyad and also University of Paris. My communication is entitled From Conception to Solidarity Conception, a literature review with the kind supervision of our dear professors Bouchra, Lebzar, and Ayyad. The outline is as follows. We'll start with an introduction, and then I'm going to shed light on the context and interest of the research, and then I present my literature review concerning the evolution of consumer society, the ostentations conception, and the concept and criticism, and shed light on pandemic context and also the solidarity conception. So, in introduction, we can say that conception is a prior concern of our modern model of society. It's not only a way of satisfying our needs, or it's only a way of expressing and positioning oneself in relation to others, but it's also an increasingly powerful tool that serves consumers. In fact, for a long time, the company's main concern was to produce enough to gather for the demand. Although this situation could not last, given the mechanism of market saturations, companies continued to put the products at the heart of their preoccupation. In the customer's age, consumers are placed at a higher rank for all brand activities. So there has been a really increasing awareness among consumers who shifted their attention to their role as actors through the act of purchasing. So through the act of purchasing, consumers live experience, share opinions, and choose which products can be or cannot be in their personal sphere. Okay, so there is a quote of Harari, which he wrote in 2020 in the pandemic context. When choosing between alternatives, we must ask ourselves not only how to overcome the immediate threats, but also what kind of world we will live in once the storm passes. Yes, the storm will pass, humanity will survive, most of us will still be alive, but we will live in a different world. This is a context which is marked by a strong globalization that profoundly changed our lifestyle and works and conception. So, the interest of our research is to identify the phases of an event that mark the history of the consumer society, to present a brief history of the conception society, to underline the decline of conception society model as one of the multiple aspects of a new conception model, and also to shed light on the pandemic, which has driven people to reconsider their vision about their society. So the present communication draws on literature review that takes ostentation's conception as a starting point to present a brief history of the conception society, notably through the crisis of COVID-19. For example, for Torsten Vebler, ostentation conception is the act of showing insistently and excessively. For Frederick, it's the indirect display of an advantage of quality and the attitude of someone who seeks to be noticed. Although the consumerism in sociology is described as an economic ideology in which the conception of goods and services has a capital place in society without a political ideology. For conception society, for Baudrillard and Cadona, there are three main characteristics, which are the considerable increase of number of consumers, the recognition of the power of consumers, and also the role of psychological aspect during the conception. So I tried to present a tendency timeline with the main phases of the history of the evolution consumer society that I will develop in parties. So here we're gonna start with the evolution of the consumer society. In this section, we intend to identify the phases that mark the history of consumer society. We also analyze the conception in Occidental countries' context as it formed the core of this model of society. We're gonna start first with the Industrial Revolution that took place in the 18th century, and the major causes are the development of the middle age of the technical revolution in agriculture, which are the origin of the settlement of this mode of exchange and production. Then in the 19th century, the period called the difficult start, which the economic expansion has been launched during the 19th century and was slowed down by the crisis of overproduction and the world conflicts that affect Europe. So for this period, Henry Ford's model has largely contributed to the settlement of the mass conception. This model incorporates an increase in income, which in turn generates consumption, which itself leads to an increase in development of production and therefore forms a virtuous spiral. So we're gonna go now to the effective implementation after the Second World War. What has really changed in 15th, according to Bull, the author of Histoire du mouvement du consommateur in 1984, at the end of the Second World War, was the original purpose of business. The work of producers and distributors traditionally oriented upon meeting needs changed drastically towards a model based on creation of requirements. So the following diagram provides a summary of the major stages that we just quoted up to the effective implementation of the consumption society. So we have the period of the 20th century industrialization, which is marked by the mass production, the structural changes in rural brain drain, the first conflict from 1920 to 1929 after the war dynamism and the economic crisis in 1999. So therefore, the glorious 30, this period has not certainly been smooth because of the fight for independence in several countries, the May 1968 protest, the women's movements in Western countries, this long period from the post-war world to the first oil shock was characterized by a singular economic upturn with an exceptional level of growth that have been witnessed in industrialized countries in 13 years after the war. Then we have the 30 trauma. So here, Gerard Mermet lists the shocks that France in particular has experienced since the end of the glorious 30 years, like the fuel shock of 1970s, the financial shock of 1987, the collapse of Soviet bloc, the Gulf of War, the worst social movement of 1958, the spread of the internet bubble from 1995, the attack of September 2001, and the economic slowdown in the Iraqi conflict in 2003. So we move to the bulimic phase. The 17th are considered as a reckless period where consumers indulged in frenetic consumption, reinforced by an uncompleted pursuit of gratification and pleasure also. The individualistic phase. In 18th have been called the firm's years. The effects of the crisis are becoming more and more noticeable, but at the same time, consumers do not recognize them. The level of consumption was decreasing of the decade, interest in luxurious goods, and has never reached such a level. So we see a paradox in the level of consumption that has become in the first decade, the implementation of new social policy that aimed reducing inequalities and the consumers' indulgence in uncontrolled consumption. So in the opportunistic withdrawal phase, which began from the 19th, was accompanied by a brutal awareness. The Soviet bloc collapse has resulted in a feeling of anxiety over the search for a new equilibrium a rise in employment, the European construction is being carried out reluctantly. The Gulf War adds the final touch to the gloomy picture of depressed economy. The contemporary society, the rise of new technologies, opened the era to the communications. Excitement seems to be sustained and the revival of the desire seems to be well established according to the study conducted in 2020. So the rise of there are various determinants of contemporary consumer behavior, like the awareness of quality criteria, the concern of authenticity, the search of the best price to the good deal. The brand loyalty is not taken for granted. The search of pleasure. So at the in the end of the evolution of consumer society, we're take the quote of Klaus Schwab, which is the author of La Quatrième Révolution Industrielle, who says that today we are witnessing the fourth industrial revolution, which started at the end of the 20th century, the digital revolution, at the development of artificial intelligence. Its dissemination is faster and more globalized than the previous ones, and with unlimited and complex implications. So here, we'll move into the ostentatious conception. The notion of conception society first appeared in 15th and 216s to reflect the emergence of lifestyle criticism. So the theory of Ottingen maintains the role of conception society in the complexification of the consumer's attitude and the increase of consumers' influential power. So the pandemic context. In Morocco, according to the High Commissary for Planning, the demand side of the national economy is expected to be negatively affected by the health crisis in parallel with the offer, noting that quarantine and restriction measures are expected to bring about changes to the markets. So panoply of initiative has concretely emerged, where solidarity has been slogan shaped for our battle against the pandemic, and the initiative came from His Majesty the King Mohammed VI, who decided to prioritize public health over the economy. And the sanitary crisis caused by COVID-19 has led our company to take a fresh look at the notion of collective risk. Since the emergence of virus and its global spread, our vulnerability to this pandemic highlights the fragility of our organic nature. So in conclusion, can say that all in all, trying to define conception is an impossibility. We are all concerned by this topic as consumers, and according to the whole phases from the evolution of conception society to the ostentatious one, and therefore with the emergence of the pandemic context, lifestyle has really changed. So we have to move on and to rethink the conception as a collective way of processing. Thank you very much.